A billionaire once offered an independent watchmaker double price just to skip his waiting list. The watchmaker said no. A different collector turned down an unsolicited seven-figure offer for a watch he paid $4,000 for because selling it felt like selling a memory. And one Swiss brand has denied every single celebrity request for early access for over 60 straight years. No exceptions regardless of the offer. Luxury watches were never really about who has the most money. They're about the rare handful of things money still can't jump the line for. Today, I'm breaking down the 7 levels of luxury watches, from the tier anyone can walk in and buy to the tier where money alone stops being enough. Let's get into it. Level 1. The entry point $500 to $2,000. This is Tissot, Hamilton, Longines, Tag Heuer at the bottom of its range. The names that get you into Swiss mechanical without needing a second job to afford it. Most people assume this tier is a starter kit, something you outgrow. It isn't. A Tissot PRX runs about $600. A Hamilton khaki field automatic starts around $500. For that price, you're not buying a cheap watch. You're buying a real one, just without the name that makes strangers turn their head. What Level 1 actually buys is legitimacy. The movement is genuinely Swiss. The case is solid stainless steel, not plated. Serviced properly, this watch outlives the person wearing it. Nothing about the engineering is a downgrade, only the reputation is. The buyer here is usually late 20s to early 30s, a few years into a real income, buying their first watch that isn't a gift or an Apple Watch. They're not trying to signal anything to anyone at the table. They're trying to own something that will still be correct on their wrist in 15 years. Level 1 isn't the cheap seats. It's the floor everything else gets measured against. Every level after this one has to justify why the exact same function should cost 10, 50, or 500 times more. Level 2. Tudor and Omega, $2,000 to $11,000. This is where the name on the dial starts doing real work. Tudor is owned by Rolex. Same tooling, same DNA, and in the Black Bay line, a watch that borrows more from the Submariner than most people realize. It starts around $3,600 and holds up against watches twice the price. Omega sits in the same bracket with a stronger name. The Seamaster Professional, the watch James Bond has worn since 1995, retails around $6,000. The Speedmaster Professional, the watch NASA chose for the moon landings, starts around $7,000. The buyer here has usually already owned a Level 1 watch. They know the difference between a branded movement and one built in-house. They are not buying a bigger logo. They are buying the difference between a good watch and a watch with a story attached to it. Level 2 is not about impressing a stranger across the table. It is about owning something that would hold its own, even if nobody at the table knew what it was. Level 3. Rolex. The icon tier, $8,000 to $20,000. Rolex does not make the most complicated movement in the industry. It does not make the thinnest case or the most experimental design. That's not what the brand is selling, and it never has been. What Rolex makes is the most recognized watch on the planet. Full stop, no qualifier needed. The Submariner has looked almost the same since 1953. The Datejust has remained part of Rolex's lineup since its debut in 1945. A brand doesn't get that kind of consistency by accident. It gets it by refusing to change something that already works. The current steel Submariner, reference 126610, retails around $11,400 in the US, but retail price barely matters here. Demand for the most wanted references is high enough that most buyers meet this watch on the secondary market first, at a price well above what Rolex actually charges for it. The buyer at this level isn't buying something for themselves to understand. They're buying something everyone else in the room already understands. The Submariner doesn't need an introduction, neither does the Daytona. This is the first tier where the watch stops being just a well-made object and starts being a signal instantly read by people who've never opened a watch magazine in their life. And from here, it moves fast. If this is useful, the like and subscribe are how you tell me to keep making these. This channel exists to answer one question over and over across different industries. What's the real reason people pay for this? Not the reason printed in the ad copy. Stick around because starting at level 4, this stops being about the watch at all. Level 4. The Holy Trinity, $20,000 to $150,000 at retail, often significantly more once you look at what these watches actually sell for. There are three brands the industry has called the Holy Trinity for decades: Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, and Vacheron Constantin. The Audemars Piguet Royal Oak was sketched in a single night in 1970 on an impossible deadline by a designer named Gerald Genta, and it now starts around $24,000 for the entry 41mm steel model. The Patek Philippe Nautilus, designed by the same man 4 years later, reportedly in 5 minutes at a restaurant, starts around $90,000 for the base steel reference after Patek's 2025 price increase. These aren't watches you buy to tell the time. They're watches you buy because you understand what's happening inside them. Finishing that takes longer than it takes most brands to build an entire movement, start to finish. Brands that have kept that standard through 2 world wars and a quartz crisis that put most of the industry out of business. The buyer here doesn't shop in the normal sense. They get on a list, build a relationship with a boutique over years, and are eventually offered a chance to buy, not the other way around. Nobody is being impulsive at this level. The decision has already been made long before the watch is. This is where a watch stops being a purchase and starts being something closer to a holding. Not an investment exactly, a holding. Something you keep because giving it up costs more than the number on the receipt ever could. Level 5. Haute horlogerie. Picture this. A watchmaker spends 3 years on a single movement, not 3 years building watches. 3 years on this one. Before it's finished, the movement will have more than 600 individual components, each one finished by hand to a tolerance the eye can't actually verify. When it's done, it will sell for somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000. This is haute horlogerie. The top complications from Patek Philippe, Jaeger-LeCoultre, A. Lange and Söhne, and Breguet aren't status objects. They're engineering arguments, proof that a human being can solve in gears and springs, problems a $2 app solves without even trying. A perpetual calendar that knows the difference between February in a leap year and February in every other year. A tourbillon invented by Abraham Louis Breguet in 1801 that rotates the entire escapement in a cage just to cancel out the effect of gravity on accuracy. None of it improves how well the watch does its actual job. All of it proves the person who built it refused to cut a single corner. Level 6. Independent watchmakers. At this level, the manufacturer is often just one person, one workshop, one name, one movement built start to finish by the same hands. Philippe Dufour makes roughly 6 watches a year. His simplicity, no complications at all, just hours, minutes, and a hand-wound movement, sells for upward of $250,000. He has no marketing department. He doesn't attend trade fairs. He doesn't need to. François-Paul Journe makes around 1,000 watches a year out of a workshop in Geneva. His early references, long discontinued, now trade for 2 to 4 times what they originally cost, not because they're rare in a manufactured sense, but because there's simply no way to make more of something that was only ever made once. MB&F is something different again. Less a watch brand, more a small laboratory. Machines that barely register as watches at first glance, each one built by founder Maximilian Busser alongside a handful of specialists he trusts completely. The pieces start around $60,000 and climb past $200,000 for the more elaborate builds. The buyer here has usually already owned the Holy Trinity. They're not chasing a symbol anymore. They've had the symbol and it stopped being the point. At this stage, you're not buying a watch other people recognize. You're buying one that only means something to the handful of people who'd know exactly what it took to make it. Level 7. The $31 million watch. In 2019, Patek Philippe donated a single watch to a charity auction in Geneva. The Grandmaster Chime, reference 6300A-010, the only version of Patek's most complicated wristwatch ever made in stainless steel. 20 complications, 2 dials, a case that reverses to show a second face entirely. It sold for approximately $31 million. 5 years earlier, at Sotheby's Geneva, a Patek Philippe pocket watch called the Henry Graves Super Complication sold for $24 million. Patek built it in 1925 at the request of one man over 8 years. Among its complications is a chart of the exact night sky over Central Park, as seen from that one man's home on Fifth Avenue, a feature with no possible use to anyone who isn't him. At this level, the watch has left the category of object. It has entered the category of historical document. Here's what the $500 buyer and the $31 million buyer actually have in common. Both decided what was happening inside the watch mattered. Luxury watches stopped being about keeping time the moment quartz made mechanical precision unnecessary. A $20 watch has kept better time than a $31 million one for 50 years. What replaced it is one proposition: the way something is made tells you something true about the person who made it.